And good morning, colleagues. Good morning, postgraduate students. Today we'll talk about the proposal writing. Maybe without waste of time, let me go to the outcomes of this workshop. We will look at what a research proposal is, and then how to choose a research topic. And then we'll also look at the different aspects of writing a research proposal. Let's start with the title. When doing a proposal, it is always advisable to make your title as clear as possible and as short as possible. Depending on the college that you are attached to, some colleges will tell you that your title should not be more than 19 words. I think one should be able to check the college that you are attached to and familiarize yourself with the requirements there. But what is critical is that the research topic should involve all the issues that are at hand or that you want to investigate about. Your topic should also be researchable. A researchable topic is the one that can be investigated through the collection and analysis of data. For instance, if I come up with this topic, should prayer be allowed in schools? This can be a great topic for a debate, but if you look at research, this is not researchable simply because it consists of opinions. So it doesn't allow you to go into a scientific processes to unfold it. So you need to avoid topics that encourage what you call the opinions. It should be scientific. So let's look at what it means to propose as a postgraduate student. First thing, you have three questions that you need to ask yourself as you propose your title. And then the first one is, what is the problem? You need to ask yourself, what is the problem with whatever topic that you intend to investigate? And why is it important for you to conduct a study in this area? And then the last one is how, which covers the methodological issues, because you also need to think of how are you going to unpack this topic in order for you to be successful in your study. So at the same time, you also need to think of some other implications that can affect you, such as your financial implications. You also need to check maybe if you are intending to enroll in a particular university, how much can it cost you to study there? And then again, the time-wise can talk to issues around the duration of the qualification. Before you enroll, you need to understand how much time is it allocated for you. What is the minimum duration for completing a master's or a doctoral? And then what is the maximum duration for completing that? And then that will also assist you to do your proper planning in order for you to know when are you intending to complete your study. So let's look at how to choose the topic. Firstly, you must ask yourself, why are you interested in a particular topic? That's the first thing that is very important. And then the information providers, who are the information providers within the particular scope? So that brings you to your target population or your target sample. Who are you going to engage with in order to get the information for you to complete your study? And then you also need to think about what are the major research questions within the topic. Once you have the topic in mind, you need to ask yourself, what questions can you bring in order for you to respond to the particular problem that you have identified? And then again, why is your topic important? Is it important at a local level, or is it important at a national level or international level? So you also need to think, what is your target group? Who are you contributing to? And then the issue of when. The issue of when is also important. When is your topic important? Like, for instance, we're in COVID-19. You cannot talk about challenges that maybe schools have experienced during COVID-19. conducting your study now because we are in the post-COVID-19. So instead of looking at the challenges, maybe you can look at maybe the post-COVID complications that maybe schools are experiencing. What are the issues maybe around articulation gap that the COVID-19 has resulted into? So you need to think about the when. We don't want students to conduct studies in topics that maybe are outdated. So you need to align yourself with the current trends and the current issues that are affecting the population. Let's quickly look at the difference between the topic and the working title. Well, the topic is something that is more of general, while the working title is more specific. So you can have a broader scope which talks to your topic, and then but when it comes to your working title, it has to be specific. You need to tell us specific issues. What is it exactly that you want to do with this study? Then let's look at the background, which is the first aspect that one has to articulate in the research proposal. When we look at the background, any thesis has to have a background. That's very important. You cannot conduct a study without a background. Normally, in this aspect of the proposal, you review studies that have been researched before, and then you also tell us about the information about the surrounding issues about that particular problems. What did the previous studies revealed in that particular area? Normally, this is the first part of your research proposal. So this background, it should provide the context of your study, and it will also help the reader to understand why is your topic important or worth to be investigated. That's where you need to convince the one to try to justify the need for this or for your current study, that this is important because of you try to show us the knowledge gap that your study is aiming to address. So let's look at the difference between the introduction and the background. Normally, in the first part of your research proposal, you will start with your background, and then later, and then you'll give us the background of the study. So you need to know what is the difference between the introduction and the background. So normally in the introduction, you offer the preliminary details about the issues that the reader would most likely to read. Whereas in the background, you are underlining the importance of your work or your study. Hence, I indicated the need to identify the knowledge gap that the previous studies failed to address and try to position your study to fill those gaps. So in the background, you explain in depth on the issues that you want to investigate or the issue that you want to investigate about. Whereas in the introduction, you just give an overview of what the study will be all about. So how you structure your background? Normally, we advise students to follow what we call a funnel approach to background writing. So with a funnel approach, we want you to tell us what is known about your problem, starting from the international perspective. You can pick 2 or 3 international countries. You can pick your Jamaica, your USA, your Singapore, and then give us an overview of the identified topic or the identified problem. How is the international community affected by that particular problem? And then from there, you move to the African perspective. You tell maybe you can pick 2 or 3 as well, African countries. You can pick Zimbabwe, Lesotho maybe, and Nigeria, just to give us an overview on how they are affected by the issue at hand. And then from there, you come to South Africa. You can give us a broader perspective about how the South Africa as a whole is affected by the problem identified. And then you can break it down into the province. If the study, for instance, is conducted in Gauteng as a province, tell us how this problem is affecting the province. You can even go down to the district or the circuit that you are going to investigate in, to try to give us some background on how that particular district or that particular circuit it's affected by the problem. So as you present your background, you must also attach the problem to the background. We must try to present it in a problematic way. Once we read your background, we must already see the need for your study and also the problem that is being investigated here, without even going to the problem statement. Just to read the background, we must already know, okay, this is the problem. We can already see that problem A has been identified in this study. Then the second aspect of your research proposal can be your research question. Any research project should have a research question that need to be answered. Once you identify a problem, you need to have some questions that you put in for your study to answer. So a research is concerned with seeking solution to the problem or answer to the questions. If we say you have achieved your objectives in your particular study, it seems the problem that has been identified has been solved through answering of research questions. So a research question and a problem statement are directly coming from your research topic. So we want to see your research questions aligned with your title. You cannot have a title on a particular topic and have a different research questions that are not aligned to your title. So you need to ensure that there is that clear alignment between your research question and your title. Immediately you identify a topic that worth inquiry. You then start to formulate your research questions. What questions can I prepare in order for me to answer this problem or to answer this topic? So what is important is that your research questions should be clear to the reader. We don't have to anticipate what do you mean by a particular research questions. They should be clear. Once a person reads, they don't have to read it 5 times before they establish some understanding. Once they read one time, they should already understand what is it that you are asking here that you are intending to answer. So normally we structure the questions into the main research question, which comes directly from your title, and then from there you break it into sub-research questions. So in a study, normally you will have one main research questions, and from there you can formulate some sub-research questions. They can be 3 or more, they can be 4, they can be 5. It's up to you. So I gave an example here with the topic or the title, the implementation of IQMS in 4 secondary schools of Pretoria. So from this title, one has to come up with the main research question. So with the main research question is how efficient is the implementation of IQMS in 4 secondary schools of Pretoria. So that's the main research question. And if you check the main research question, it comes directly from the title that is suggested there. It has to come directly from the title. Then from there, you have to come up with the sub-research questions that support your main research question. So the first sub-research question here will be, what is the motivation for the implementation of IQMS? That's the first research question, sub-research question. And the second one, what are the attitude of educators in these 4 schools regarding the implementation of IQMS? And then the last one, what extent do these 4 schools benefit from the implementation of IQMS? So if you check these 3 questions, they are designed to support your main research questions. So once you have that main research question, you have to have sub-research questions to support or to answer your main research question. We should see the alignment between the two. So in a case of a quantitative, one can have instead a hypothesis. So in a hypothesis is a precise or testable statement of what the researcher predict will be the outcome of the study. So you must have prediction in your mind that you conduct your study to prove if that is true or is not true. If we say in South Africa, load shedding has resulted into unemployment. So that is the hypothesis, because that is never been tested. So if you have that as your hypothesis, you need to conduct a study to check if this load shedding has some implication or has some contribution into a high unemployment rate. So that's how you come up with your hypothesis. So how do you formulate one, or how do you formulate a hypothesis that is more effective? So firstly, you need to state the problem that you are trying to solve, and then you make sure that the hypothesis is clearly defined, the topic, and is focused on the experiment. That's very important. You have your pre-thinking in your mind, and then from there you must come up with the experiment in order to prove if that is correct or not correct. So try to write a hypothesis as if then statement. So I gave another example here to say, if you attend all lectures, then you will pass the research module. So that's the hypothesis, that if someone attend all classes, they will pass the module. But that can be tested. That can be true or can be false. So you need to conduct a study now to check. You try to check all those students that have attended the module against those who did not attend the classes. So to check if you can prove this to be correct or not. So in your hypothesis, you must also define your variables. What are the key concepts within your problem? You try to clarify those variables. Then we look at the research objectives. So the research objectives, they normally describe what you expect to achieve in a particular project. Once you have your research questions, you need to give us a brief description of your objectives. How are you aiming to achieve all those objectives? So the best way to write your objective is in the SMART format. So in the SMART format, we encourage that they must be specific. So you need to specify exactly what you need to achieve in your objectives. They must be measurable. If you say you have achieved a particular objective, how can we measure that? Do you have evidence that we can say, yes, it's achieved because of we can measure this, we can see by this evidence. And then again, it should be achievable. So something achievable, it should be practical. You cannot come up with a study that cannot be, the objectives cannot be achievable. And again, it should be relevant and time-bound. You can't conduct a study that will take you 10 years to achieve, while you only have 5 years, maybe in your PhD, to complete your study. So normally in research objectives, we use action verb such as explore, identify, analyze, recommend, determine, assess, diagnose, or identify. So let's look at the purpose of the study. So with the purpose, we need to know exactly why are you conducting a particular study. The purpose should be clear and aligned to the topic. You can't come up with a title but have a different purpose. For instance, with the example that I gave earlier, our purpose here will be, the purpose of the study is to investigate the implementation of IQMS in 4 secondary schools of Pretoria. Then let's move to the problem statement. This is another aspect that is very important. You need to tell us what is the problem, or what is the problem statement in your project that you intend to investigate. So in research, a problem statement, you normally articulate the issues that the researcher is attempting to find answers to. You must have some sort of questions to answer those problems or those identified issues. So normally the problem statement must not be long. 1 page is more than enough if you are articulating your issue in a clear and effective way in a PhD study. So you don't have to write 5 pages in your problem statement. At this level, you can write maybe 2 paragraphs or even 1 page, and then that will be enough as long as your problem is presented in a very clear manner. So in a problem statement is usually a more detailed explanation of the issue at hand. You frame the context as well and the relevancy of the problem, stating how you plan to solve it. That's the first thing that is important. And then again, the problem statement should also describe undesirable gap. I already articulated the issue of revealing the existing gap within a particular body of knowledge, of which when you come up with a problem statement, we should clearly see that gap between the current issues and your study coming in to try to address such. Problem statement should include absolute or relative measures of the problem that quantify the gap. If we talk of failure rate, we need to quantify it. What percentage are you talking about if it's a failure rate, for instance? And you must also articulate some possible causes of a particular problem. So in a study, there is no way you can do research until the problem is recognized, and that should be very clear. So in other words, before you start with any project, you should have a problem that you have identified, and that should be clear. If I ask you to explain what is the problem in this area, you don't have to struggle to explain. Once you struggle to explain, it means your problem is not clear. Go and research more about it. It should come straight from your mind in a very clear manner that you can explain to someone to convince to say, yes, this problem worth to be investigated. So a good problem statement should clarify what to be resolved. So once you start writing this aspect of your research proposal, you need to clarify as exactly what needs to be resolved, or what is the problem, what needs to be resolved. And then from there, you also need to restrict the scope of the study. When you restrict the scope, you need to tell us the affected group, who is affected by this problem. Now you are restricting the scope to give us the specific target group that is likely to be affected, or that is affected by a identified problem. So the other thing, the problem statement, it is very important in this area to give a clear and concise statement of the problem. And then the most important one, you need to support your problem statement by the existing literature review or by the relevant literature. You need to find some literature to support what you present to be a problem statement. And how you write it, firstly, you need to contextualize the problem. We need to know what do we already know about this problem. And then from there, you describe the exact issue the study will address. What do we still need to know about this particular problem? Then from there, you need to show the relevancy of the problem. Why do we need to know more about this problem? Now you are also trying to position the importance of your study, and then you also set the objectives of the research. So for normally I advise students to think of 4 W's that make your problem complete. Once one of these 4 questions are not answered, it means your problem is not clearly articulated. The first one is who is affected by this problem. That's the first thing. So when you write a problem statement, we need to see who is affected. And then the second one is what. What is the problem? You need to clearly indicate or clearly clarify what the problem is all about. And then the third one is where. Where is this problem existing? We need to know about that. And then the last one is, why is this problem worth to be investigated? So these are the 4 key questions that you put in mind as you conceptualize your problem statement. So once you see all these 4 key questions addressed in your problem statement, then your problem statement is complete. So a good problem statement, firstly, should be concise. It has to be simple. It has to be clear to the outcomes that you intend to understand. So the reader should understand the problem statement from the first read. Like I already indicated, we don't have to read it 5 times before we can understand. The second one, it should be specific. So it should be precise, straight to the point, and should convey direct message for the reader. And the third one, it should be measurable. So the problem should be regulated by frequencies, or to what extent is this problem affecting this population. So that also needs to be addressed in your problem statement. And then the affected audience as well, who are affected by this particular problem. So you need to clarify who are the affected population as you articulate your problem statement. And the next aspect, which is literature review. In the previous workshop, we spoke in deep about the literature review. So at this stage, we normally call it a preliminary literature. You give us a brief literature about the studies that you will be able to consult as you conceptualize your research proposal. So in brief, at this stage, which is a proposal stage, you simply show us what has been done in your study as you do your preliminary literature review. And then you interrogate some debates and discussions in that area. And then you also reveal some findings of other empirical studies that are in line or that are related to your study. And then you also try to identify some gaps in the literature. And you also position your study to show us how your proposed studies aim to fill those gaps. And then you must also streamline the literature to align it with your research objectives. So normally we advise students to make sure that whatever literature they review, it's more aligned with the objectives of the study. So this assists in reviewing the literature that is more relevant to your study. So this is the process of conducting the literature review. You need to identify some keywords within your study. You research and identify some relevant information. You also need to obtain some copies of your literature. You must also create your reference list. You take your notes as you read your literature, and then you can start writing your literature. And then some essence of the literature review. As a student, you need to prove to the reader that you are informed about the topic that you are investigating, and then it's through this chapter or this section that we can see if we have read enough about the topic that you are trying to conduct a study in. And then you must also have the understanding of the main published work within that particular area, who are the gurus within that particular space. And then when you write this, you must start by defining the topic. What are the key concepts within your topic? And then you must also decide on scope and boundaries. You cannot review everything that comes your way. You also need to have your scope. And then I already indicated that your research objectives are likely to assist you to align your scope. And then you also define the topic in terms of the keywords that you normally call them the operational concepts. And then you explain what the reviewed study is all about. That's the actual reviewing of your literature. And then you also articulate its relation to your study. And then you bring in the knowledge gap. You identify the knowledge gap within that particular literature that you are reviewing. And then when you identify the knowledge gap, you can use the focus area, you can use the research approach or design, you can use the geographical context. So maybe you may find that the studies are conducted in different contexts, and then you bring that as your knowledge gap to bring the argument that these studies, they were conducted in different areas. Then let's look at the literature theoretical framework within your research proposal. So normally in a research proposal, you also need to tell us what theory are you going to make use of in order to bring some theoretical grounds within your study. So at this stage, we just need to briefly tell us what theory are you going to use in this study, and then what is the relationship or the relevance of this theory to your study? How will this theory assist you to achieve your objectives? So you need to identify some lenses within a particular theory and use those particular lenses to explain the key concepts or the operational concepts within your study. So that's how you write your theoretical framework. The issue of identify key concepts is very critical. We normally call them theoretical lenses that you explain them within the context of your study. And then some students will decide to go for the conceptual framework as opposed to the theoretical framework. And then now in your conceptual framework, you also have to to identify and define the relevant variables within your study. What are the key variables that are guiding your study? And then you can use all the concepts that guide your study to come up maybe with a particular framework that you can recommend maybe in your study, particularly at the doctoral level. They'll want you to bring in what you call a new knowledge. So in this conceptual framework, you can take all the operational concepts and then come up with your own framework that will contribute to the solution of the identified problem. That's the conceptual framework. And then this is an example of conceptual framework. You can see these are the guiding concepts or the operational concepts that were guiding this student. And then from there, the student came up with the key concept, which is a total vulnerability. So all these concepts, they result into vulnerability or the total vulnerability. So this student can come up with a model from this to say, this is the model that I'm contributing, maybe that will reduce the issue of threat, maybe in a particular space. Then let's move to the research methodology. So any research proposal will have to have a research methodology. Let's start with a research approach. So as a student, you also need to tell the reader what approach or what the research approach did you use. So what is critical in this section, the research methodology? You need to justify the reason for adopting a particular aspect of your methodology. For instance, if you say in your study you are going to use a qualitative approach, you need to explain to us why qualitative approach. If you are using quantitative, why quantitative, not qualitative? Again, if you are using mixed methods, you also need to justify why did you find mixed methods to be relevant for this study. You don't just say research approach qualitative and then you are done. You need to justify to the reader why did you find a qualitative approach to be relevant to your study. So that's that kind of justification becomes very important, as particularly at this section, the research methodology. So the second aspect of research methodology, we can look at the research design. You must also clarify what design are you going to use in your study, and then use again justify why did you decide to use, in the context of a qualitative, maybe ethnography. Why did you find ethnography to be relevant? Why did you decide to use narrative research? Maybe because your study is more of maybe storytellings, then you find maybe narrative research to be more of relevant design that you can use. So you can also look at the historical. So most of the history people, they prefer to use this as their research design. And then you can also use case studies. So case studies, there are also different types of case study. You can even go deeper into identifying the type of case study that you are going to use in your study, and why did you find that to be more relevant to your study. You can also use phenomenology, which is more of a lived experience of a particular group. Maybe you want to look at the day-to-day practice in a particular school, or how the school operates on a daily basis. So you can maybe go for phenomenology that will allow you to engage them on a daily basis, see how they do things on a daily basis. And then that's the research design. You need to justify why a particular design you find to be relevant to your study. Like in a quantitative, you can use a descriptive study. So in a descriptive, is a combination of a narrative and statistics. So maybe you can have a mixed method whereby you want the results of your quantitative to be confirmed by the qualitative. You want to see if the results that you got from one approach can be confirmed by the other approach. So normally in a descriptive study, people will use a mixed method to try to bring the balance between the two, or to use the results of a particular approach to confirm the other. And then you can also use a correlational as your research design, whereby it will allow you to measure the relationship between two variables. Like I gave an example of load shedding. If load shedding cause unemployment in South Africa. So those are the two variables that you can use the correlational study to try to confirm if the two has got relationship. Is there any relationship between load shedding and unemployment? So then you can opt for the correlational to confirm such. And then you can also use quasi-experimental. So this is to establish a cause and effect of relationship and independent and dependent variables. So you want to see if it's more related, the quasi is more related to the correlational, because you also want to establish if there is a cause or the effect of the two variables that are in relation. Then you can also use the experimental research, and then where a set of procedure to test a hypothesis. We already spoke of hypothesis. If you have a particular hypothesis, so you will use the experimental to confirm if that hypothesis happened to be true or not. Then we move to the research paradigm. So in a research proposal, you must also clarify the paradigm that you have adopted. The first one, in the context of the mixed method, you can use a descriptive study. In a descriptive study is the combination of the narratives, which is from your quali, and the statistics. Is there you try to combine both the statistics and the narrative part to try to reinforce your findings for addressing issues such as the reliability of your findings, so that one can see that we have got both numbers and the narrative to bring weight to your findings. Then you can have the correlation, which talks to the relationship between variables, and the quasi-experimental, and then the experimental research. So let's look at the common beliefs and agreements shared between the scientific research. We look at the different types of the research paradigm. And then the first one can be your positivism. With the positivism, the argument is that the knowledge derived from the experiment, the experience. So you may interview people based on the experience, and then in order for you to generate some particular knowledge. And then we can also have what you call interpretivism, which argue that the understanding of the world as it is from a subjective experience of individual. So whatever individual you are trying to engage, you need to avoid them being objective and try to push them towards a subjective contribution of whatever that you are engaging them with. And then the third paradigm can be your critical theory, which is oriented around critiquing and changing the society as a whole. So with the critical theory, you are deeply engaging with issue. You ask, why is this the way it is? You are critique everything that you find. You don't just accept everything as it appears. You need to critique and try to see, why is this the way it is, and then try to find answers in your study. And then we have population and sampling. Normally in your study, we already spoke about the target population as you think of your study. So your target population should be articulated in your proposal. What is your population? Who forms your population? If your population consists of teachers in a particular district, you have to clarify that. And you can also attach the population size. How many teachers constitute your population in that particular district? If you have 200 teachers in District A as your population, you need to give us that population size to say the population in this study consists of 200 teachers from this circuit or from this district. So that has to be clear. So now with the sampling, you specifically break down that from the population. From the population, you need to sample or to select a particular number that you'll be able to manage as you collect your data. So normally the sample is less than a population, because the population is a bigger group or the larger group that you are going to draw your population from. So we don't expect to see your sample size bigger than your population. It will not make sense. So from the bigger group, which is population, you select how many are you going to select. So if you have 200 teachers in that district, for instance, in a qualitative study, you can decide to take maybe 12 teachers to interview them, maybe focused or one-on-one. So sample, you select a manageable group from the main population. Then you must also talk of the data collection instrument in your study. We need to know how are you going to collect your data. For instance, you can collect it through questionnaires. You can collect it through surveys in the context of quantitative study. You can, maybe in a qualitative, you can use interviews. With interviews, you must also specify if these are individual interviews or these are focus group interviews. And you can also specify the kind of interview. Is it semi-structured individual interviews, or is unstructured individual interview? You need to clarify. We need to know what kind of interviews are you going to use. So that has to be clear in your data collection instrument. Then you can have observation as well. And with the observation, you also need to specify what kind of observation are you going to conduct? Is it participatory observation or is it non-participatory observation? So that has to be clear in your proposal. As you conceptualize your proposal, clarify all those issues so that the reader can see the how part. Remember, the methodology section is on the how part. You are clarifying the how are you going to conduct your study. So all these issues has to be clarified so that we know how you are going to conduct your study. And then you can also use the document analysis. So with the document analysis, it's always advisable to list or to indicate the kind of document that you are going to review or that you are going to analyze. Don't just say document analysis and leave it there. You need to clarify document analysis and the kind of documents that I'm going to use is CAPS, is policy documents, it's maybe a school policy on learner discipline, all those documents that you are going to engage on, you need to clarify those. And then you can also use your lab experiments as your data collection. In the science field, they will go to the lab and do some experiments. So those are your data collection instruments. You can use scales, and then you can use what you call a Questa views. So with the Questa views, you design your questions in the open-ended kind of questions, but instead of asking them in an interview format, you ask them to write their responses down in an open way. So you'll have a question and then you'll have a space, maybe a paragraph for them to fill in their responses. So this happens sometimes when you try to schedule meetings with your participants. You may find that they don't have time, maybe it's during exam time. So you must also always think of option B. What can I do now if teachers are now busy with the examination? Maybe they are only free maybe from 7 in the evening until 10, and you cannot schedule your data collection during that time. So you can opt for these Questa views to give them the Questa views, let them go and respond to all the questions, and then give them to you. Then you can go through the responses. And then if you see a need for a follow-up meeting, then you can arrange that to say, can we have maybe a follow-up meeting? Maybe a 10 minutes follow-up meeting. You'll note down all the follow-up questions that you may have, and then you can get clarity on those, and that will save a lot of time on your side. And then after data collection, you must also explain to us how are you going to analyze your data. So normally that data analysis is a process of inspecting, cleansing, and transforming and modeling data with a goal of discovering useful information, informing conclusion, and supporting the decision making. So you look at the data that we have received, and then you try to process it. How are you going to unpack it to make sense to your study? That's the process of data analysis. So if you are using thematic approach, you'll go through the data that you have received, and then you try to extract some themes from the responses that you got. So you may also use some softwares that you normally use to analyze data. For instance, in your qualitative, you can use NVivo, you can use Atlas TI, you can use MaxQ DA, you can use the DOS. There are so many softwares that one can adopt. But I think what is important here as well is to try to check with the university what license do they have. Normally universities maybe will opt for 1 or 2 softwares because they are very expensive, and then you familiarize yourself with those that the university has got license so that you can also have license of those. And then in a quantitative, some will use SPSS. You can also use Excel spreadsheet, and then you can use also SAS. So there are so many softwares that one can adopt. Like as I indicated, just do your research and check the ones that the university has got license to, so that you can easily have access to. So the next aspect is on the limitation and the delimitation of the study. So any study will have its limitations and then you must also articulate such in your study or in your proposal. So normally the limitation are the flaws or the shortcomings that you may experience in your study. So limitations, they are beyond your control as a researcher. Say for instance, we are talking about the unavailability of resources. That is beyond your control. You look at the issue around time allocated. You may find that you are trying to collect your data. You need 1 hour, maybe with the candidate. The participant can only have maybe 30 minutes for you. So those are the limitations, because now you'll have to maybe rush your data collection in order for you to make the time allocated, which is 30 minutes, instead of 1 hour. So those are the limitations. So anything that it's a shortcoming that is beyond your control, you need to articulate such under the limitation of the study. And then the next one is delimitation of the study. So with the delimitation, they are normally the choices that you make as a researcher. So you need, for instance, you can describe the boundary. Maybe in a circuit of 200 people or 200 teachers, you decide to select 12. So you are delimiting the scope so that you can be able to manage it. Because if you are to interview 200 people, the kind of data that you will receive, you cannot manage it in a context of qualitative. But as a researcher, you delimit yourself to say, I'll only focus on 12. If maybe the problem, for instance, is affecting both primary schools and high schools, and you choose to conduct your study in high schools, those are delimitation issues, because due to time, you cannot cover both primary and high school, but you decide to focus only on high school. So those are the choices that you make as a researcher to say, for now, let me focus on high school. Maybe in another project, I can maybe focus on primary schools. So those are the limitation issues. You set boundaries for your study, and then those choices are from you as a researcher. Then the other issue that is important is around the ethical considerations. So with the ethical consideration, you need to articulate some measures that you are taking as a researcher to try and protect your participants. So as a researcher, you need to articulate those issues with your participants to say, this is what I will do to try to protect you. So the first thing is issues around informed consent. You can't just barge into a school and start interviewing people. People should consent, should give you consent to say, yes, I agree to participate in this project without any payment, and that should be voluntary. So you should clarify that within the session here, the session of ethical consideration, whereby you try to explain to them how, as a researcher, will you be able to protect them. So in some studies, you'll find that maybe participants, they are dishing out some sensitive information. So as a researcher, how will you protect them from that? That is why we normally encourage researchers not to use the actual names of participants. So those are the ethical issues that you are trying to protect people who provided you with that particular information, because some information can be very sensitive, and if you attach the name towards that particular information, that can cause some problems or some implications. So as a researcher, you try to cover such, and then issues around respect. How will you make sure that you respect your participants? And then how will you protect them? Issues around confidentiality, issues around respect for privacy and all those things. That's why I will say you can't just interview teachers in a staff room. You need to find a place that is promote confidentiality or the privacy, so that you and the participants, they can feel free to share with you their concerns or their views about the particular problem. So as you conduct your study, you need to make sure again that you try and address issues around ethical consideration, and this becomes part of your research proposal as you articulate your proposal. So as I conclude, you must also have your research outline or the chapter outline of your entire proposal. So in this section, you are trying to tell us what each of the chapter entails. For instance, in your chapter 1, you just have to explain that this chapter consists of background and introduction of the study. In your chapter 2, it's your literature review and your theoretical framework. In your chapter 3, it will form of your research design and your methodology. Then your chapter 4, data presentation and interpretation. Then your chapter 5, discussion and analysis of findings. And then your chapter 6 can be your summary, conclusion, and recommendation of the study. So this is not fixed, depending on your supervisor or the college that you are attached to. Some supervisors will prefer to combine chapter 4 and 5 in one: data presentation, interpretation, discussion, and analysis of findings in one chapter. So this is not one size fit all. Depend on your supervisor. So each supervisor may have, or the college may have, a certain structure to say, in this college, this is the structure that we are using. We need all students to do uniform. They promote uniformity within the structure. Maybe they say we adopt this structure. They use 5 chapters or 6 chapters. So for this, you need to consult with your supervisor to make sure that you are not presenting something that is out of your context. Thank you so much, Dr. Majila.